Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing my thoughts on the latest 1.6 story. While the main story was good and I did enjoy it as a story, there are some issues that do worry me, especially since they remind me of problems that we have seen in Honkai Star Rail. So let's talk about them. First, we'll start with what I liked. The main story itself, the narrative, the plot in itself, I think it was very interesting and very good. However, there were some pacing problems. Also, the game doesn't exactly tell you right away that you should start with the character quest of Trigger and Silver Soldier Ambi and then go into the main story. From what I've been told, apparently they do tell you later within the main story that you should do that or something like that. But at that point, it kinda ruins the pacing if you would go like backwards to do that part. So the best approach to do the story is basically to do the character quest first and then do the main story. And this is something that the game should tell you from the get-go. Like before you start the 1.6 main story, it should warn you like, hey, maybe you should want to do this thing first. But nevertheless, beside that, the story itself was very interesting. I liked it a lot. The cutscenes, quality, good as always. As for voice acting, I heard some people complaining about the quality of Soldier 11 voice acting, but personally, I liked it. I don't think it was bad or anything like that. For Lycaon, I believe his delivery was completely fine with the new VA, although his voice did have a bit of a boomy voice at some points, and I think that's like a sound mixing problem or something like that. But nevertheless, the voice acting was great in English. Yes, of course I played it in English. Smile. Now we're going to go a bit into a spoiler heavy part. So if you want to skip this part, because if you haven't done the main story yet, feel free to skip it. I will give like a timestamp on the screen when you can continue with this video. So final warning, I'm gonna talk about it now. So the Hugo Vlad situation in the main story, where at the end of the story it looks like he's dying or is going to die. So now you could say that this might be another fake out from what we had in HSR, where it looks like the character died, but then the next patch, oh, I'm fine, nothing happened. Personally, I hope the character would actually remain dead, so there is more risk within the story that something can happen to your characters, because in HSR we always know now that nothing really bad happens to any character, and there's no worry whatsoever, even if they try to make you think that somebody died or something like that. But here we shall see how they're gonna handle this situation. But do know that Vivian has an ability to see like future disasters and stuff like that, and she hasn't seen this one, so this could imply that Hugo Vlad is alive. Also, Hugo Vlad is technically a vampire. Maybe he cheated death or something, I don't know. Personally, I would like that to be more meaningful within the story, where playable characters actually can die, but we shall see how they will handle this. I guess the Hugo Vlad part, you could also put it in my concern list, but I wanted to have it here so people who don't want to get this major spoiler, you know, right, this part, they can just skip it. And now let's talk about my concerns or things that I didn't like from 1.6 patch, specifically the story. And my biggest L in this story was the interrupted dialogues. So what I mean by this is that you had many times conversations with playable characters with voiced dialogue, and then within the same conversation it cut off to text only, and this was so abruptive and annoying, because it's not like you transitioned to another part that you're like, oh, we moved somewhere else and we're talking with somebody else or something like that. It was literally within the same conversation, talking with the same person, and just switches off to text only. So now I'm wondering, are they like cutting costs, or they just added extra dialogue after they already recorded the stuff and they couldn't go back and record those lines? I'm not sure. Whatever is the case, but it is very disruptive and it does ruin the immersion for me much more because of it. Also, what I noticed specifically now, we had quite a lot of static images, because let's be honest, before you also had them, them here and there, but do know that before the stories were shorter. This time around the story was much longer and also had more of these static images, and it was much more noticeable. At least it is voiced, but you also have to understand that Zenless Zero has interactive comic panel style of presentation as well, and I wish they just use that more instead of the static images. That would enhance the story much more further, and I believe we used to have more of these interactive comic panels earlier in the story, and I hope they do more of this stuff. And now here is another part that I personally didn't like a lot, is the flashback scenes. Because for example, in 1.4 story, when you had something that could be done into a flashback, the characters usually just told you in a couple of sentences what they did, what happened, and that's about it. If that is not possible and you really need to have a flashback, that's also fine. But the Hugo flashback, when you were like walking around New Eridu and talking with NPCs before you talk with the important guy he had to talk with, it felt very unnecessarily dragged out. They could simply got you to the part where you just straight talk up to the guy. If there was a concern of like about the black screen or something as a transition, you could have like an interactive comic panel that shows you how Hugo Vlad in this flashback approaches this important NPC, and then they talk to each other what they talked about. That would be much better, and it wouldn't feel as like unnecessary padded stuff. And speaking of padded stuff, I did felt like there was more padded dialogue within the story, which wasn't even voiced, and it kind of makes me feel like, is this even important to include it if we don't voice it? Now let's also talk about the stages itself. A lot of stuff is being reused with the stages. This is something I'm very used to if you played Honkai Impact 3rd with their stages. A lot of reused assets. Personally, wish there was more new stages to look at and see. And also now they changed it within the story that the MC can go into the holo. So we're not going with EUS anymore, but we're going with MC instead. And it's kind of weird dynamic because it feels like we're being handheld by the playable characters, what we have to do within the holo instead of the other way around where we're supposed to be their support. Maybe, I mean, I guess it makes sense perhaps because we're the first time going into the holo and perhaps they were like kinda guiding us and showing us the ropes. But I hope just in the future we still remain the actual, you know, support where we guide the agents instead of them guiding us. But this personally wasn't really that much of an issue for me, but I did spot this issue for some players on the internet talking about this stuff, and I guess it was just worth mentioning. But let's talk a bit more about the stages. All of the stages with combat sections force you to use trial characters, which does prolong the fights and sometimes unnecessarily longer. I would prefer if we had an option that we can use a full team of 3 characters to make it faster if you want to do so. Like, just give us an option for people who just want to use the trial character and have the slower fight. Let them have it. But for somebody who wants to have a, you know, faster, streamlined experience, let us just use our own characters and be able to do it. You could also probably point out some other good or bad things about 1.6, but these were the biggest parts that I personally noticed and felt, and I just truly hope the game doesn't end up like HSR with their story presentation, because I really liked ZZZ story presentation, and I hope they will keep cooking so we have a nice presentable story. I don't think we need to have like dragged out stories. Even if it's a 2-3 hour story, I think it's perfectly fine. Being a extra long story doesn't automatically mean it is going to be good. I do hope that these concerns will be addressed by the devs. Hopefully they will cook so we don't end up what we have within HSR. But let me know, what do you guys think about 1.6 story? Do you agree with this stuff or not? Or if you have any other findings or opinions about it, feel free to write it within the comments down below. And of course, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a like and all that stuff. Smile. I also do stream every single day on Twitch/YouTube. Feel free to drop by if you want to yap with me. So yeah, that's all for today. I wish you a wonderful day and see you in the next video. Ciao!